I want to apologize in advance for going over 3 minutes because I can't do that. I can't say everything that I'd like to say. One of our Paxson reunions, Tony Smith told me, he said, you know, you and Dan were always joined at the hip all through high school. And that term has stuck with me, being joined at the hip. We were born in 1948 at St. Vincent's Hospital, 4 days apart. Dan was born on April 17th, and I was born on April 21st. I don't know if our mothers crossed paths, but I know the first time I remember crossing paths with Dan was 10 years later, Miss Wright's 5th grade class, and Dan was a new student. He'd come in the middle of the term. Miss Wright was looking for a seat for him, and I was in a place that she called the jailhouse. It was in one corner, and it was away from everyone else. And I said, Miss Wright, let him sit back here. And she said, no, Jim, he's not going to sit near you. I was the only one who stayed in the jailhouse. It was my permanent residence. No one else ever stayed there. But we linked up, we got together, became very, very close friends. And like Mick said, Dan had that ability to let it out and let it go. Something I never did. I've always tried to hold my emotions inside. And I found it real refreshing that Dan was able to do that. It was good. I enjoyed it. Didn't always work to our benefit, but it was good that he could do that. I remember in the 5th grade, right near the end of the term, it was in May, hot, and we had a substitute teacher there. And she was Miss Prim and Proper from Southside Jacksonville. And here she is at Marietta, Thomas Jefferson. We were like varmints, you know. I mean, they come and they just amazed at us. And they're standing in the line going out to lunch. First thing you know, Dan and Gerald Cornwall are in a fist fight. I mean, just duking it out with each other. And I remember they came and they broke them up. And this prim and proper teacher, she's fanning herself and goes, "Oh, it must have been the heat. It must have been the heat that made those boys fight." And I want to say, Dan and Gerald get in a fight almost every week. You know, I mean, this was nothing new. And then they walked home together. They lived off Maple Lane, both of them. They walked home down the railroad track to get to Maple Lane, and they would go there. But a fist fight was very quick to crop up most any time. We were in the 6th grade the next year, 6W, Mr. Ward's class. He called us all brother. We were Brother Casey, Brother Hendry, Brother Kelly, Brother Gurley. Everybody was brother. This was at the height of the Cold War. We had duck and cover, we had all these drills, and we had these kegs full of water in each of the portable rooms, just in case nuclear attack. And once a month they had to take them outside, empty them out, and put fresh water in. That was kind of a perk to be chosen on the water brigade. Dan and I usually weren't on the water brigade. But anyway, this one time we were selected to be on the water brigade. And we're out there filling that out. You know, 11-year-old boys, first thing you know, one's in a headlock, you know, and we're wrestling around, and everybody was doing it. But Dan and I were joined at the hip. We were the ones that got caught. None of the others got caught. Mr. Ward comes out there. All right, Brother Hendry, Brother Casey, back in. You're off of the brigade permanently. So he goes back in the door. We wash up, we go inside. I go in, sit at my desk. Dan comes in and slams the door. I mean, wham! And he goes, "You mad, Brother Casey?" And he says, "You bet I'm mad." And he said, "Okay, we're going to the principal's office right now. Come on, Brother Hendry." I said, "Hey, I'm not mad. I'm not mad." No, you're coming. Went down there, we got 3 swats. This was back when corporal punishment was common, you know, in school. We got 3 swats with a paddle from Mr. Barnett. And that wasn't no big thing to us, really, because this is how stupid we were. Mr. Ward used to give us swats, and we would make paddles and bring them into him to use. And anytime somebody would bring in a paddle, we'd volunteer to go up there, "Here, give me one," you know, and get a swat. That's how dumb we were. We did it. But that was a case of Dan volatility coming up. Being joined at hip was no more exemplified than when I got a motor scooter, a Vespa. I had a Vespa. But Jim Clemens had a Honda. Huey Hall had a Harley Davidson, I think. Wayne Rollerson had a Cushman. Everybody, we had motor scooters. And Dan and I went everywhere. We went to Tampa, went to Orlando, went to Daytona. One time we had it in our mind we were going to buy fireworks. So we went up to Georgia. We got there and we found out you couldn't buy fireworks in Georgia. We said, well, where can you buy them? They said, South Carolina. I said, how far is that? You know, at 50 miles an hour on the motor scooter, it was about 5 or 6 hours. But we went on. We went on to South Carolina, bought the fireworks, came back with them. Our parents had no idea where we were. No idea we were even gone, you know, or that we were doing things like this. But Dan and I loved black music. We listened to the black station in Jacksonville. And there was a singer called Willie Perriman, whose stage name was Piano Red, who had a hit record called Dr. Feelgood. And we heard on the radio that and so then after the hit record, he became known as Dr. Feelgood. It was known as Dr. Feelgood and the Interns. That was his group. We found out they were going to be in Macon, Georgia. Macon, Georgia is like 300 miles north of Jacksonville. But we go. It was a Friday night. We go on the scooter. We go, we get there, we get directions. It's about 8 or 9 o'clock. The show's already started. We're in an area of town that people with our complexion usually weren't in, you know. We were the only ones there. We find our way to the club, and it was a real low building, had telephone poles in the ground, parking thing, and so we pulled up there on my motor scooter and parked it. And there's a table, and there's a brother sitting out front, and I can see him looking at us as we're walking up. And I said, what can I do for you guys? We'd like to see Dr. Feelgood. And he looks and he said, where do you dudes come from? First time I'd ever been called a dude. I'd never heard that term in my life. Dude, I thought that was a cowboy or something, you know. Where do you dudes come from? And we said, from Jacksonville. And he took a long breath. Okay, go in there and keep your mouth shut. That's what he told us. So we went in, got a little table there, off to the side. Waitress come up, we ordered a beer. She said, there ain't no way. We were 15 years old. But Dr. Feelgood came on. You talk about Dan's favorite song. You probably didn't hear about that one. One of the first lines in the song is, hey, all of you women, don't come around unless you weigh 400 pounds. Because I'm from way down home and I don't like dry bones. That was Dr. Feelgood and the Intern. We were there till like midnight, till the last show. Came out. Everybody treated us great. We treated, you know, this was a time when the racial tensions were going on and all, but all I know is how everybody treated us. We got treated fine. It was good. We had a wonderful time. Piano Red was fabulous. And we came back, and I guess we got back home about 6 in the morning or something. Our parents with no idea that we'd been gone, where we were, or anything. Just such a different time we know today. And then we went into junior high, and we played all 3 sports, always. Had a wonderful time at Thomas Jefferson. Got into high school, played football and baseball. And you talk about being the free spirit thing, kind of worked against me, but after playing ball for about 5 or 6 years, I got it in my head that the only reason I'm playing is because people think I should play, and that's not a reason to play, you know. So I didn't even play my senior year, but Dan did, and he did excellent. He was co-captain of the team. He was a Gateway Conference Player of the Week one time. Did just a fabulous job. So we get through high school, and then we're starting college. And we go and register and sign up, and our classes are Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And so we had a plan to meet on Tuesday after our first day of classes. So we met Tuesday for lunch. He comes to down and says, hey, how'd it go? How was your first day? Not very good. Wow, what happened? They signed me up in a co-ed phys ed class. I was supposed to take phys ed. I go there and it's all girls. Nothing in there but girls. And I said, well, you just need to go to the registrar. You know, they'll put you in. He said, well, it doesn't matter now anyway. I said, it doesn't matter. And he said, no, I joined the Army. I said, you what? He said, I joined the Army. You joined the Army. 6 or 8 months later, Dan's in Vietnam. Tan Son Nhut, Melee, My Lai, all these places we heard Walter Cronkite talking about on TV. Dan's there. I'm married at the time, expecting our first child. we moved into Riverside in an apartment on, brain just went blank. Willow Branch Avenue. So that's where our daughter Carmen was born. We lived there. Dan's in Vietnam, riding back and forth. Fast forward 46 years, from 1967 to 2013, last year. Dan calls me. He's moving out of the South Side. He'd been in the South Side a long time. He's moving in to Riverside. He says, I got an apartment on Willow Branch. I said, Willow Branch? I used to live on Willow Branch back in '67. Really? So anyway, Dan has this plan to have a pre-wake feast. Invited all the close friends, all out to Mojo's. They're on St. John's Avenue. We had a wonderful time. It was fabulous. Dan had everything. He had steaks. He had pulled pork. He had ribs. He had chicken, corn on the cob, macaroni. I mean, you name it. We just had this feast there. Then afterwards, he said, I want you to come see my apartment. And okay, what's the address? 16006. 16006. Man, that sounds familiar. 16, okay, so I followed down St. John's and I turned 16006. It's the apartment I lived in. It was a building that had been converted. He said, mine's upstairs. I said, mine was upstairs. Upstairs, first door on the left. He said, yeah, that's my apartment, apartment 3. I walked in that door and you talk about a deja vu. I go in there and I go, Carmen's baby crib was right here. Right there. We used to sit over here on the floor and play Yahtzee. And then over there's a kitchen, and then there's a bathroom, and all of that was there. It was amazing that Dan, 46 years later, moved into the same apartment that I had. And then I had this week, Mitt called me and told me what had happened. And he said, Brother Leroy's going to let us go to his church. And I said, okay, I need the address. So he said, I got to get the address. So we got it. He called me. It says 1401 Evergreen. I said, Evergreen? He said, yeah. I said, when I moved from Willow Branch, I moved to Evergreen. Evergreen and 12th Street, big 2-story house. It's about 4 blocks down there. Wow. Is where I moved from there. So when you say we're joined at the hip, I think we're still joined at the hip. I can't explain everything. One of the things that kept Dan and I through all of this was our mother's prayers. I want to give tribute to that because Les died, Dan's mother, in '74, and shortly after that is when the Agent Orange stuff started happening. My mother died 2.5 years ago. I've been in the hospital 7 times since then. A mother's prayers, you don't have any idea how powerful they are. You have children, you have grandchildren growing up in this world today. They need your prayers. They really do. You have no idea how far they go and how far they reach. Dan's in paradise. I know that. I have no worry about that. We had a feast at Mojo's, but it's nothing like the feast we're going to have for the next one when we have the reunion. Because the Bible says, eye has not seen and ear has not heard what our Father has in store for you and me. We have no idea how wonderful it is. But Dan knows. He's there now. And we're going to join him.